Okay, welcome. Welcome to the module Emerging Fields in Architecture, to another lecture in the field of logic discovery. Today we talk about architecture and serendipity. The subtitle of the talk is Space Echoes, Architecture, Storytelling and Serendipity. I'm very glad that Ralo Mayer accepted to talk about his work today. He's a friend and we have also worked on various occasions, so I personally value his work a lot. Some of you may also have seen some of his work or heard about him. Ralo Mayer is a multidisciplinary artist. He lives in Vienna. Based on performative research, his long-term investigation of objects from science fiction, outer space, and earthly related realities delineate ecologies of contemporary histories as multi-layered storytelling in installation, film, performance, and also text. Ralo Mayer has presented his work at international exhibitions, conferences, and film festivals, and has been awarded several scholarships and prizes. His webpage is Was ist Multiplex? I will post it in the chat. And thank you again, Ralo. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Yes, I will do this in English. If there are any questions in English or German, we can switch, or how you feel. And please feel free to also interrupt if something comes up, etc. Starting the... So... Does it work?
Yep.
Yes.
Good. So in this presentation, I will talk about spaceships and greenhouses. Greenhouses in outer space. I will talk about the futurist tower from the 1970s and the Japanese architecture movement Metabolism. I will also talk about a curious device called Space Echo, and perhaps even about a prison on the moon. But actually, this presentation is not about all these things. If there's one thing this presentation will be about, it's probably about storytelling and about the practice of artistic research that does not look so much like a planned methodology, but more like getting lost. So expect I will get lost, and perhaps you will also get lost at one point. So today it's 97,820 days of serendipity. There's not so many words where we know exactly when and where they showed up for the first time. And the word serendipity is one of these words. It came into the world on January 28th, 1754, in a letter that the English writer Horace Walpole wrote to his friend Horace Mann. In this letter, Walpole told his friend about an accidental discovery that he had just made in a book about Venetian coats of arms. I myself still have not quite understood what the discovery was precisely about, and I will not bore you with my little understanding of it. But Mr. Walpole was extremely excited at this discovery and even marked it in the old book of heraldics. You can see this little mark in the lower left corner of the old book. His excitement about this discovery was only surpassed by his musings about the nature of such accidental discoveries. And in this letter, he wrote, this discovery indeed is almost of that kind which I call serendipity, a very expressive word, which, as I have nothing better to tell you, I shall endeavor to explain to you. You will understand it better by the derivation than the definition. I once read a silly fairy tale called The Three Princes of Serendip. As their highnesses traveled, they were always making discoveries by accidents and sagacity of things which they were not in quest of. For instance, one of them discovered that a mule, blind on the right eye, had traveled the same road lately because the grass was eaten only on the left side and where it was worse than on the right. Now, do you understand serendipity? And so with this little excerpt from the letter, Horace Walpole invented a new word, serendipity. The Three Princes of Serendip is an actual fairy tale that exists, but from the beginning, everything else was all wrong and mixed up. Because in the actual fairy tale, the princes didn't find a mule, they found a camel. And more importantly, they didn't find it by what we understand as serendipity at all. So Horace Walpole describes serendipity as accidental sagacity. So you find something by accident, but you're clever enough to recognize that it's brilliant. Because the princes in this fairy tale, they found things by deduction and interpreting clues. It's more like a detective story and has also been cited in other detective works. So this expressive new word, serendipity, about accidental sagacity, emerged from an accident of fabulation, an accident in storytelling. A little bit of bad research also helps. Or in German, we could say, wer schlecht sucht, findet. So there might not be many words of which we know when they have been used for the first time, but very often we know and remember when we ourselves have across them the first time. For instance, I think I came across the word serendipity the first time while I was doing research on Biosphere II. I began to do research in 2007 and early on found this word also. Biosphere II was a closed ecological system in the desert of Arizona. And for 2 years, 8 people and 3,800 species of plants and animals lived in it, closed off from the outside world. This artificial biosphere was built to test future settlements in outer space and to learn more about the global ecology of planet Earth. I cannot get into the details of this wonderful experiment within this presentation, especially not so much about its wondrous history and background. Let me just say that its founders were not classically trained scientists, but came out of the 1960s counterculture in San Francisco. They had started out as a theater troupe in '67, and then started to look for synergies between different disciplines of science, art, and ecology, influenced by, for instance, Buckminster Fuller. In the early 1990s, they were criticized, if not made fun of, as hippie leftovers, as curious echoes of a bygone era. Today, their practice might be celebrated as an example of artistic research. This poster is not from a movie about Biosphere II, but from a movie that is also about greenhouses in outer space. In some not so distant future, spaceships orbiting Saturn house Earth's last trees and plants because our planet suffers overpopulation and industrial pollution. What you see here are the spaceships of that movie, the Valley Forge and the Berkshire. The domes are basically artificial biospheres in space, very much like what the biospherians actually tested later on in the 1990s. Silent Running, the movie, was made by director Douglas Trumbull in 1972. And at some point before production began, Douglas Trumbull went to Japan and visited the World Expo 1970 in Osaka. As you see, it had a strong image of some future there. It was perhaps the last expo that proposed also an architectural future as such. In summer 2015, I applied for a residency in Tokyo, provided by the Austrian Arts Ministry. My proposal was to explore the Japanese take on the Frankenstein myth and the relation of nature, culture, and technology. And I also wrote, and it was the center of my proposal, that I wanted to visit the site of Expo 17 Osaka, especially visiting one tower, the so-called Expo Tower. This tower was built by Japanese architect Kiyonori Kikutake in 1972. It's a giant tower with some capsules attached to it. And this tower also inspired the spaceship in one of my favorite science fiction films, the aforementioned Silent Running. I think it's pretty clear that it a bit more than inspiration. Basically, Douglas Trumbull copied it. And there's also in the movie, Douglas Trumbull had some references in the spaceship in the background here, where the astronauts eat. You can see several postcards and other material from Expo in Osaka. Kiyonori Kikutake was one of the key figures of Japanese metabolism, and as architecture students, you must probably have heard about metabolism. Let me just sum up some of its main ideas. As one of the most influential architectural movements of Japan, metabolism intertwined ideas of megastructures with biological and natural concepts like growth, decay, and renewal. It was in exchange with other Western architectural movements after World War II, proposing utopian designs for future buildings and built environments. But at the same time, metabolism was deeply rooted in Japanese culture and history. Megastructures were based on industrially prefabricated modules and cells, like their futurist designs of their Western colleagues. But the very idea of an expansion of the built environment into the air or ocean also corresponded perfectly with Japan's geographical limitations as an island and a long history of natural disasters. Many of its futurist modules, like in Capsule towers, were also directly referring to traditional Japanese floor plans based on the size and ratio of tatami mats. Metabolism was an architectural vision of modularization and expansion into new territories beyond solid ground. And its biggest showcase, international showcase, was the World Expo 1970 in Osaka. Its slogan was "Progress and Harmony for Mankind." The master plan for Expo 70 was developed by Kenzo Tange, perhaps the best known architect of metabolism. He collaborated with 12 other architects, and one of them was Kiyonori Kikutake, who had actually built the first urform of metabolism with a house for his family, which he called the Sky House. Long before the Expo Tower, Kikutake had built into the sky with his family mansion. Expo 70 was perhaps the last expo that laid out designs and beliefs in some future. Here is the central Plaza space frame with the Tower of the Sun by Taro Okamoto. This is the most famous and iconic structure of Expo 70. And this is also where my problem started. Because when you Google Expo Tower Osaka, you find information that this tower is still there and it's open to the public and you can visit it. But the Expo Tower I was looking for does not exist anymore. And I only found this out some weeks before I went to Tokyo, after the residency has been granted to me. So I briefly panicked that when I found out that the tower that my research was based upon doesn't exist anymore. I still went to Osaka and found the spot where it once stood. You can see in the middle of the photo there a dark spot, and it's still that's the basic shape of the tower on the ground. So there's still this little remain there. And basically I wondered what to do with this, because I did not find the tower at all. There's nothing there, not even a proper ruin. The only thing that I found was a model at the old Expo Museum. So in Japan, I tried to visit other buildings of metabolism, and especially by Kikutake, but most of those had been destroyed because of, or dismantled because of earthquake regulations, and they were in decay or being restored. And so I could not visit many of them. And especially that many of those buildings were totally in decay was strangely in line with the idea of metabolism, like some sort of metabolism. And one of the few remaining buildings is this tower here. It's the Nagoya Capsule Tower in Tokyo, Ginza. It's by Kisho Kurokawa. And in the photo here, this is, I think, from the 70s. And it's still quite, it's a great building there in the area. And today it looks rather like this, and all the surrounding built environment is much higher. And so it kind of almost disappears within the rest of the architecture context. And while I was there, I saw some people on their smartphones, because Pokemon Go was still, and perhaps is still going strong in Japan. And they were playing Pokemon Go. And interestingly enough, the main structures in this game, mobile game, are also towers. So they were probably not even noticing the architectural icon tower they were standing next to, and playing catching virtual Pokemon and battling in Pokemon towers. So anyway, this was where I was in Japan, and I didn't find out very much at this point, and so I got quite depressed about this, and went on more a tourist spree. One night I browsed through Craigslist in Japan, or the Japanese Craigslist, and I saw that someone sold a device called Space Echo. And I didn't know at all what it was, but it sounded interesting. And soon enough, I found out it was a sound effect device from the 1970s. It's basically an echo machine, a delay machine. And I also found out that it had turned out quite influential for popular music, as it was the first affordable and reliable echo machine that was available. And it was, for instance, extremely influential for Jamaican dub. Anyway, I did a bit of research how it worked, because I liked the name of it. And I found out that it's a tape loop. So basically, it's like an old tape recorder. It's a tape recorder that constantly records and replays along a loop of tape. And it's a feedback machine, more or less. And the wonderful thing about this Space Echo is that you can actually see the loop going on. And it's quite a mesmerizing movement when it moves. So I thought, why is it called a Space Echo? Like an echo that's a reflection that needs space and time. And preferably it needs a large space. Because if the space is too small, the delay in time is too short, and we cannot recognize the separate sound. So empty space and not too complex, because too many angles create reverberation. And again, not a separate sound. So outer space is perfect, except that in outer space there's a vacuum and there's no sound without an atmosphere. So the whole name of space echo is kind of a weird thing in the first place. On the other hand, there are echoes from space. On the one hand, like since the Apollo missions, scientists have been sending laser beams to the lunar surface, and those laser beams have been echoed and reflected by devices left there. And this little setup allows us to measure the distance to the moon to the centimeter since then. So there's a kind of a scientific use for echoes in space. And on the other hand, we've been also sending out messages hoping for something to come back in one or another form, like the message, the Arecibo message, or different golden records sent to space on space probes. So the echo is an effect in time, like a time machine. But it's also about space, because it is a sound that is reflected in space. The echo is basically a product of time through space, of different spaces, like an echo of an expo, of a tower, or a sound machine. Something that keeps coming back, something haunting, always on the verge of feedback hell. And after weeks of research in Japan about the Roland Space Echo RE201 and visiting countless vintage music stores and Japanese websites, I finally found a working space echo.
Long time, it's gonna be dangerous. And you'd better take care about this kind of tape guide felt. And this is very sensitive. So once this pressure gonna be changed, echo gonna be died. Okay. So yeah,
This is important.
Yeah.
The space echo was built in 1973. Is that right?
Yeah, it's right. It's right. By Roland.
I've heard it was the first affordable delay.
Yeah. Before space echo, there were many types of tape echo also, but it's most reliable. So it's a best tape echo.
I bought it and it's in the back there. I still have it. While I try to track down this echo machine in a working condition, I sometimes continue to aimlessly browse the web, still looking for hints for the whereabouts of the Expo Tower and what happened to Kiyonori Kikutake. Kikutake had died in 2011 and his office was closed. Even their website did not exist anymore. I sometimes watched some old footage related to Expo 70 on YouTube. And
解体が決まってからにわかに注目を集めるようになったエキスポタワー。しかし、もっと以前からエキスポタワーに惹かれ、毎日写真を撮り続けている人がいます。松浦博正さん。松浦さんは普段新聞社のカメラマンとして働いています。幼い頃に来た万博の記憶はほとんどないそうですが、エキスポタワーの強烈な印象が少年時代の思い出となり、エキスポタワーは松浦さんにとって何者にも代え難いふるさとの風景の一部となっています。松浦さんは撮った写真をホームページに掲載しています。松浦さんのホームページにはすでに21万人以上もの人が訪れています。
全く予想が。So, in this one excerpt from a Japanese TV report, which turned out to be from 2005, I saw this little hint to a website. And I tried the website and the link was down. And then I found a contemporary version to the link, a contemporary version of the website. And from what Google translation told me, the photographer is a huge fan of the tower and has taken hundreds, if not thousands, of photos. So I was extremely excited, and I found this website with all these wonderful photos of the tower that didn't exist anymore when I was there. And I looked for any contact information about the photographer, which was also in the YouTube video, and found his address and started typing an email to him in the middle of the night. Dear sir, I have just found your amazing homepage about Expo Tower. My name is Ralo Mayer. I'm an artist from Vienna, Austria. I'm currently living as artist in residency of the Austrian blah, 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 and would be extremely interested to get in touch with you about your love for Expo Tower. My interest for the Expo Tower comes from the science fiction film Silent Running, in which the spaceship Valley Forge is inspired by the Expo Tower. I attach an image from the film. I would love to hear back from you and hope to get in touch with you. Thank you very much and best regards, Ralo Mayer. Then 1 or 2 days passed. And then I got a reply. Hello, Ralo Mayer. Thank you for sending email for me. My name is Hiromasa Matsura. I'm living in Osaka. I'm very glad to hear that you are interested in Expo Tower too. Thank you for showing me a picture of Spaceship Valley Forge. I don't have watched the movie yet, but I feel the spaceship is certainly similar to Expo Tower, especially pillars and cabins, the left part of spaceship. I lived near the Expo 70 commemorative park in my childhood. I normally spent the days with futuristic Expo Tower. When Expo Tower was broken down in 2003, I decided to construct it again. I made it in a 1:140 scale model with pipe and thin plate of brass by soldering. It took 14 years to complete. Now I can live with Expo Tower forever. Attached images are pictures of model Expo Tower. Thank you and best regards, Hiromasa Matsura. And we sent a few emails back and forth, and he also told me that right before it was demolished, there were some plants growing in the capsules, very much like in the Silent Running movie. And so basically you have all these utopian designs for future lives based on modules and biological concepts of cells and decay and regrowth, and all these things are again mirrored in the architectural tower right before it vanishes, before it disappears again. And after a lot of emails back and forth, we were able to set up a meeting in Osaka. And yeah, so we visited the site, and Matsura-san would give me a guided tour through the whole expo park, and yeah, we also visited the place where it stood before. And yeah, it's a bit closed off there. And while we were there talking about it, there were a lot of birds flying around, and knowing that crows can get quite old in birds' lives, at least, we began to wonder if there are some birds who might remember the tower from when it still stood, and maybe they missed it as much as the Japanese photographer missed the tower from his childhood. And so what I did also after our talk and talking about the birds is that I unpacked my little drone and tried to basically perform the invisible tower with as an embodied movement of the camera eye. And on top of it, yeah, I took this image where you basically, that's from a height of 127 meters, which was the height of Expo Tower. And you can still see the hexagonal shape on the ground. where it once stood. And some weeks later, when I looked at these images, I realized that this was kind of a classic view of an archaeological site, like a bird's eye view of an ancient burial site. It's an archaeological view. And then musing about this, suddenly a word came to my mind, which is connected to archaeology, unearthing. And unearthing, of course, is normally associated with digging up objects from the past, from underground, hidden under some sediments. Basically, you go towards the center of the earth, you go down, and you try to dig up things that are hidden, some things from the past. But one could also, then I thought one could also think about this in another meaning, the term of unearthing, which would more point towards the future and which would be more akin to notions of unlearning or decolonization. And so we have the meaning of unearthing in this archaeological point of view towards the past and down. And if we think of unearthing as a process that, for instance, humans might undergo when they are leaving the planet and live outside the earth or on another celestial body, then you can think of unearthing as a transformation that might happen in the future or that has already started in a way. And so this would kind of mean to follow and trace and reflect future trajectories that will bring the human species as such away from our home planet and how it will change the entirety of the human condition. So I thought at least I found this wonderful new word with my looking for the tower. That's at least something. And back in Tokyo, I talked at an opening with a curator about my almost or like failed lookout for the tower and for remains of it. And he told me to go visit the Sky House in Tokyo. So the old family house of Kiyonori Kikutake, the original cell of metabolism, because he said he has heard that there might be a piece of the tower there that Kikutake brought there when it was dismantled just before, and also before he died. So in the yard of the Sky House, there might be a piece of the tower. Yeah, so again, Sky House looks quite different today. On the one hand, it has changed a lot over the decades, and then also the built environment has changed a lot. And I went there, and it was very hard to look into the yard there. This is not me. This is Rem Koolhaas. It's a photo from his book about metabolism. And yeah, so I was basically also at the same side, and I tried to look inside. I didn't see any piece of the tower next to Sky House. And then I turned around and saw that on the other hand, on the other side of this little small road, there was the former office of Kiyonori Kikutake. And I had a look in there, and all of a sudden, I saw this little metal piece on the right side. You see it on the right side there. And I instantly recognized it as a piece of joints from the tower. So here you have it in, on the right side, in the center right side. And while I tried to take a better picture over the fence, suddenly someone approached me from the back and said what I was doing there. And I said, I'm looking for a tower, and I think I just found a piece for it. Yeah, and that person was talking to me in English, which is quite unusual in Tokyo. And then the woman who had approached me asked me if I wanted to come in. And I said yes, and it turns out it was the widow of Kiyonori Kikutake who had just passed outside while I was taking pictures in it. And she invited me in so I could take closer shots of the entire thing, of the joints here. And then here's also a piece from the capsules themselves. And Kikutake's widow apologized many times because she had put all the plants in front of this old piece of the tower. And I told her it's just wonderful because there's again this plant and ecology thing going on, although in a very different thing, but it's a beautiful setup and I liked it very much. And from another angle, the same setup is also basically spans a lot of architectural Japanese and international history and science fiction history since the 50s. You have the Sky House, which is almost not so recognizable anymore with all the changes around it and the changes it has undergone itself. In front of the Sky House, you have a Mercedes from the 1990s, which is standing at the exact same spot where it stands on the photo from the Rem Koolhaas book from the 2000s on Japanese metabolism, which basically rediscovered metabolism and brought it back to the international stage a bit. And so the same, this 1990s Mercedes is still standing on the same spot in my photo there. And then you have a piece from the tower from the 70s, which inspired a spaceship from probably a future of 2200 or something. And in front of it, you have some rather ordinary potted plants from the widow, which she has just put there. So so this happened basically at the end of my stay in Japan, and I was extremely happy with it. So just about these few photos that I could take, because it kind of summed up a lot, and I managed to get a space echo and bring it back to Vienna with the embassy, and so at least I found some things. And then there's one more story, and that's in this case perhaps particularly interesting to you as architecture students. I try to make it short. So at one of my touristy excursions in Tokyo, I found out that I'm very close to the offices, to the Tokyo offices of the Japanese Space Agency, and decided just to go there. It was just a basic office building. And I entered, and of course, nothing big was there. It was just offices and nothing interesting going on. And I went to the elevator and tried to look around in the building. And suddenly a woman approached me and asked me what I was doing. And I said that I'm an artist and interested in space and space-related things. And she said, yeah, she works at the Japanese Space Agency, and they had just done a festival on space arts. Also, and she's also in touch with space architects. And then a few days later, we exchanged emails, and a few days later, she said I should go to this one workshop at the university outside of Tokyo, where there was the end presentation and also a competition for architecture students who were invited to design settlements on the moon. And so I went to this end presentation there, and of course, as I only found out there, everything was in Japanese, and also the presentations and posters were in Japanese. So I could only see the titles of it, but that you get used to that in a way. And it was still interesting, and but I could only get the basic titles of things during there. And my favorite project was by two students from Mukugawa Girls University. So it was basically it was a competition for students from all over Japan. And their proposal for a settlement on the moon was a tower. with some sort of capsules attached to it. And of course, that was why I kind of liked it, because it reminded me of the tower I was looking for. And I just see there's a lot of things in the chat which I haven't realized. I'm an idiot, I didn't look. Shall I go back to these questions now? Sandra?
Sorry. No, I think we can do it later.
Yeah, sorry. I only saw this now.
Does anybody want to interrupt and has an urgent question now? No, I think we can do it afterwards.
Okay, I'm almost finished. So where was I? Yeah, at Tokai University, south of Tokyo, late November, Sunday. And yeah, so I really like this one presentation, although I could only see images on the poster. I don't understand any Japanese, and interestingly enough, this project called Australia won the second prize, I think, as far as I remember. And I thought, Australia, it sounds a bit neo-colonial, but yeah, that's how things unfortunately still are in the space field. A lot of colonial language, etc. And yeah, but I really liked it, and there was even an artificial biosphere in it, supposed to recycling, and it was extremely interesting. And so my plan was to talk to them later on, and so later that evening we went to a restaurant and had dinner, and all sat together, the students, the teachers, the invited space experts, and me, the foreign artist. And I tried to talk to the team of the tower on the moon, and the two girls, Aiko and Haruka, they explained their project, and I understood a bit. So their economic rationale for the entire project was mining on the moon. And because, mining in space is no longer only from science fiction, like in Ridley Scott's Alien, but in the meantime, actual laws have been passed in the US and in Luxembourg and where else. And Japan, when I was there, had just landed a robot on an asteroid. Of course, because of science, but you never know, maybe there is some economic point in it. And when I asked the girls if they knew about metabolism, and they said, metabolism, yes, of course we know. It was a big influence for our project. It was a big influence, and it turns out the two were even from Osaka. What a surprise. And I showed them a picture of my tower. Do you know this tower? And they said, no, they don't know this. Because they were just still small kids when it was dismantled in 2003, 2005. And they told me that their tower was all about recycling, and yes, it also had a small biosphere. And I said, that's so great, it's wonderful, and I really like it. And then all of a sudden, someone from across the table shouted over, so do you like the space prison? Do you like the space prison? And at that moment, just time stopped for me, and basically time ceased to exist. And my heart sank into a frozen dead abyss, and was a question like an echo from space. And I didn't know if I should scream or cry or laugh. So basically, I think I did it all at once, and everyone was looking at me, because the tower that they had designed for this competition, yes, it was a prison on the moon. And the modules were cells for prisoners from Earth. And obviously it was called Neo-Australia. So their logic was simple and obvious. It's all about resources. there's not enough space for prisoners on Earth, especially not in Japan. A lot of overpopulation. And there is a lot of work to do in the mines on the moon. So why not send the prisoners to the moon to work in the mines? And when they die, they are even recycled. And in this whole project, there was not a single grain of irony in it. And first, I hated the world and the project and myself for liking it. But then I realized the brilliance, the necessary brilliance, that they took the cell and metabolism quite literal again. And it was a cold and impeccable brilliance of spelling out what is left out most of the time when, for instance, Elon Musk speaks about colonizing Mars, or Jeff Bezos talks about giant rotating space colonies. And so I would like to thank you, Aiko and Haruka, for your prison tower on the moon, for your design for a prison tower on the moon, which catapulted me into the future in a way, the future that is being shaped right now. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Dankeschön, Ralo. Das war wirklich ein glücklicher Zufall. This was really serendipity all along. Unbelievable. I have a few questions, but does anybody of the students have a question? Please go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you for your presentation. And I wanted to ask, do you know why the photographer was so much into the tower? Was there a reason also?
He grew up next to it and from early on basically fell in love with it. I mean, it's a bit of a cliche situation, you know, that we have this cliche that Japanese persons often, or like sometimes, become these huge fans of something. But in this case, it was a kind of it was a real thing, that he had really just become a huge fan of the tower. And so when he talked about it, he almost cried sometimes when we met there, remembering it. And so that's why he built this small model at home.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I really like it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I might also have a question. Since you are very interested in space architecture and working on space architecture, we have heard a lot of presentations in our model about space architecture, a lot of interesting moon bases. But I personally always feel like the designers are not critical at all with their projects. They are like not critical at all with the idea of building anything in space. Like, I feel like the visions are always so positive and nobody really looks at the possible negative outcomes. Do you have any views on that, like on the dangers of invading space with our projects? Or because you mentioned the laws that were passed, that I found very interesting.
Yes, I mean, I can only say that I'm extremely interested in the so-called social sciences of space, which precisely discuss these issues from anthropological, sociological sides, in a way. And I wouldn't necessarily say that space architecture projects are totally blind to it. I think as many space architecture projects are blind to social realities as architecture projects in real life. I think, I mean, as with many other things, the problem might be that we just extend inequalities and problems on Earth into space, and the chance might be to that in different contexts things might turn out differently. And I think the same can be found in space architecture in a way. But I mean, if you look at the concrete, or not, they're not concrete at all, but in the renderings from Elon Musk's kind of space Mars colony, it looks like extremely shitty suburban. So it's totally stupid. But there's no, I don't think there's any architectural design in there as such. It's just illustrations or something.
But do you see any danger, like, for example, Elon Musk with his renderings? Like, he is a private company, right? SpaceX is a private company. So I feel like if somebody is going to do a moon base, it's more coming from the private sector, because the private sector is more like strong. Do you see any problems with that, or like?
Yes, but I mean, there's also problems. If I mean, that obviously there always have been problems. Like also when states go into space, so I wouldn't kind of say it would be much better if it kept on the state side or something necessarily. But my interest in space is exactly because it's an as complex arena as Earth is, and but with a little twist maybe. And so those are kind of my I'm currently, so I'm really working on with this notion of unearthing, and I think that's my current interest, basically, to explore this kind of new meaning for this old word. And for me, there could be the most wonderful things happening, and that we can't imagine in space or on other planets. On the other hand, there might happen like atrocities that we can't even imagine right now, and I'm pretty sure all these things will happen. So it's more of a question of maybe to try to shape the future along with others.
Thank you.
Maybe I can ask a question. Has anybody of you thought that you are shaping the future, or that you can shape the future, that you should shape the future? Was this thought in any of your projects so far?
Not really. Well, I think, yes, probably you do, but also to this question, also metabolism. I mean, metabolism is supposed to be a structure which is growing, like a self-growing process, right? And then, but when we design it, it's right now. So metabolism, like time and space, it's just capturing the time right now. But then in the future, there are adaptations going on. So then how is metabolism, or the structures we are designing right now? I feel like you need also another source which can adapt to the future, which we don't really know. Does it make sense? Because I feel we can just like design structures for the situation right now, but metabolism is supposed to adapt or grow in time. And then I feel like there's like the point missing, how the adaptation can look like, because they're always also just the same structures or like a multiplication. And then I wanted to know how you feel about that, Ralo, about the adaptation in metabolism, how it can like inhabit this changing factor of the future, or what's happening in the future, of this, any of your concern. Because I feel that's the same with space architecture. We like just kind of put our problems that we have on Earth right now also in space, But like you said, like space is such an unknown space or like factor. We don't even know what's happening out there. So I feel it's kind of hard to actually design in space because it's so different to like Earth. And like you said, so Earth or all our ideas are like Earth bound and not really, like you said, unearthing, because we live on Earth, right? So we just know Earth. So I feel it's maybe a bit hard or even disrespectful for us to design in space. But that's just more like a philosophical thought.
I think these are very important points there. I mean, concretely to metabolism, I interestingly enough, I found the most basically the building that for me worked the best with the ideas was not a mega structure, but that was exactly Kikutake's family house. And then, I mean, there has been countless studies about the sky house, how it transformed. And I think when he built it, there was no kids' room. And so when they got kids, they just attached a module on the on the base. So I mean, again, if you think about space stations, I personally like the ideas that that would be a proposal like not to attach another science module to the International or Post-International Space Station, but what about attaching a kids module? That would be something new. And you can really see it, but basically there's no fixed situation and you have all these different kind of developments over time. But interestingly enough, exactly this is a very non-mega structure, this family house. Because there was this question about the Nakagin Capsule Tower. I don't know the current status. When I was there, before it briefly was even available on Airbnb, to live in a capsule for a couple of nights. And I'm not sure, but I think they had an asbestos problem or something. And it was a huge, so it was a big pain in the ass to renovate it and to dismantle it, but they wanted to keep it. But I was not inside, and I really I was interested, especially in this iconic status of it, because you see all this wonderful photos of it online, and when you are there, you almost don't see it because it just drowns in the surroundings by now, and I found that interesting, and it's not a big thing for the people living there. I mean, they just play Pokemon Go next to it, and yeah. So I like that. It tells a lot about changes there, that these buildings are kind of also disappearing. Yeah, and especially from Kensotange, I think 3 or 4 of these structures were really being renovated and totally closed off while I was there, because of they didn't follow current earthquake regulations. Yeah.
There is one, or is there one more question related to this topic of metabolism? Because there's another question with a different topic.
So there was one question, I think, from Luna in the chat. Why did you bring the elements from the tower to the sky house? I think that was Kikutake himself. When it was the tower dismantled, I think he asked for some pieces and they were just brought there.
There's one question from Miriam, and she cannot, her micro doesn't work. So the question is, shouldn't our modern prison change and be more oriented towards resocialization than banishment? So a new Australia and the moon is maybe not the solution. We see a lot of in-depth question here.
I didn't see this question. Was this only to you?
Yes, it was only to me.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, shall I repeat it?
Please.
Shouldn't our modern prisons change and be more oriented towards resocialization than banishment? So a new Australia on the moon is maybe not the solution.
I definitely don't think it's a solution at all. For me, it's a symptom, but it's nice. What I liked about their project was that it kind of was so in your face. So, yeah.
I have a question to unearthing, because you said unearthing is interesting, but what was difficult for me is that you then said unlearning. And listening to you, I thought unearthing is more like transformation and not undo something. And I really don't think we can undo things. Can we undo things?
No, but is unlearning undoing?
Yeah, this is what I understood. The word learning and unlearning means like go back to a step before something, unlearning, or even an active process. Yeah,
I think unlearning the unlearning potential of unearthing would be exactly the human body. I mean, let's just stay on a bodily side. I think not to unlearn gravity, because that's not the potential of unlearning is really to go to things that we are not conscious at all about, like gravity and how much it affects every little piece of our everyday life, every segment. And I think, or now there's this beautiful example in Kim Stanley Robinson's Mars trilogy, because on Mars, what is it? I think the day is, I don't know, half an hour or something longer than on Earth. And the first settlers on Mars, they think, what shall we do with this 30 minutes? And they decide, they call it, I think, the Martian time slip, which is also another reference to another science fiction story. But anyway, and they decide that it's a time off. It's basically a heterotopian time. So that the clocks will stop at midnight. The clocks stop, and for half an hour, how long this time difference is, the clock will stop. And I think that's at least since we have clocks and human everyday life is fought along the clock and watches. That's the most radical thing that suddenly kind of pops up through very basic changes. Or if you think about the third of gravity on Mars or all these things, and I think there's a lot of potential, like to change in it. And I would not say it's undoing, because it's not undoing time in that sense, but it's actually entering something new that is very hard to foresee. And I think that's the question also about designing and shaping the future. It's kind of, no, it's a very half-blind, or no, not half-blind, but kind of no, you kind of only feel a bit into the future, and you propose things and then see they might turn out quite different.
Thank you. I think this is very nicely explained now. I understand it's not undo, like ignoring something that happened or believing that you can undo something, but it's more like breaking the habit.
Exactly, that's it. Yeah, the habits. Yeah.
And we had some question like this, you know, like we are always us until a certain moment or a transformation process that's happening here on Earth. But of course, when gravity is changing, it will be more than that. Unearthing, Sebastian, do you want to ask a question again, or with a bit of an explanation?
Yeah, an explanation would be a nice unearthing. What is that? Maybe I missed it in something.
That's a word I basically came upon in Japan that I'm working with right now. It's a term. So usually unearthing means like to dig something up in the archaeological sense. And I proposed a different direction, not down and things from the past, but outwards and pointed towards the future. So for me, but what is unearthing is exactly my question, my research question for the past 2 or 3 years now. And so what could that be? And I think as an example, this fictitious example in Kim Stanley Robinson, the time slip hour is kind of such an example. Or I think unearthing for the first time happened when the Apollo astronauts in Christmas, December 68, looked back on planet Earth. And so basically human eyes for the very first time saw the so-called blue marble, the whole Earth as such. And then they took a photo of it with that, transported it back. And so that's a kind of, it's a different view of Earth, and but on the other hand, exactly triggered by going outside it in a way. So I think then that's when processes of unearthing generally in human society started in a way, but only just like as a little start. But you know, if you think about using off-Earth resources and space mining and all these questions, so there's a lot. It's a huge thing that I would kind of sum up under this name of as a process. Is that a bit clearer?
Yes. Do you think that the shift in the heliocentric view from Copernicus was also kind of an unearthing process because the Earth was not in the center of thought anymore?
Yes, but I mean that's an interesting point again, because strangely enough, the Earth went much more into the center when the Apollo astronauts first went out of the orbit. No? So I think there's a very complex things going on there, which I find very interesting. And if you just look at the budgets of NASA from the 80s on, like more and more budget goes to geocentric research. It's about the ozone hole, this and that, and now we of course a lot goes into research about global warming, etc. And it's interesting transformations going on, I would say. So, for instance, the entire idea of the anthropology, of the Anthropocene is so much based on research from space. Although it describes a geological epoch on Earth, but it's based on research coming from outside the Earth's surface.
Why do you think so? How do you mean that?
Because a lot of the detection scientific apparatus is off Earth, like satellites, etc. It gives a entirely new view. No?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, for instance, this mentioned the photos of the hole in the ozone layer, which turned up in the 80s or something at one point. I think it was kind of the opposite side, the dark side of the blue marble, because no, it was not only this beautiful thing, but suddenly you saw, oops, we did something bad here.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I should mention now that Ralo Mayer is an artist, and his specialty is research by storytelling, right, Ralo? So the questions that we had before, don't you think there's also a negative or positive? I think Ralo is researching a topic from different perspectives. That is also what he mentioned now, is changing the perspective. It's good to change perspectives, to see something new. That is also why I invited him because he has a particular method of how to approach the question that he is wanting to solve, or maybe not solve. Ralo, maybe I described it totally wrong.
No, I think that's a very important point. I'm not an architect, so probably most of you know much more about metabolism than me. So the beautiful thing about artistic research is that you can be a very excited dilettante, which I enjoy. So yeah, and that's also my point, that sometimes it's also good to do non-proper research, because you find things, you stumble across things that you wouldn't have found otherwise. And that has a lot to do for me with storytelling and misinterpreting things.
Yes, critical thinking is also relevant in our profession. Even more important today in this week. Do you have another question to Ralo Mayer?
Just a question again to your approach, how to find an answer. So then would you say so the question you're asking yourself, would you say it's open-ended? So you don't even want to find like a certain answer, but just like a way or like a guidance on how to find the answer?
I don't think there's I will find an answer as such. I mean, it's a classic thing. I'm more, but it's interesting to find more interesting questions, perhaps. In a way, yeah. I mean, to find an answer that yeah. I think particular answers, yes, but general answers is, I would say, it's a very dangerous territory. That I mean, that's what conspiracy theories propose, that they have an answer, which are interesting stories, but yeah, only from the storytelling side.
But I think you said it before, something like the more you look, the more you find.
Ja, wer schlecht sucht, findet.
All right. Thank you very much, Ralo, for the insight into your projects and how you approach projects. Was very interesting on many levels. And I wish you all a good day. And wer schlecht sucht, findet. Maybe we should all try to search. How do you say schlecht suchen? Not search, or how would you translate it, Ralo?
I don't know. I think I have thought about it, but I haven't found a translation. Sometimes it's also nice that you can't translate words, like serendipity.
This could be the exercise for today.
Thanks for the invite. It was very interesting and a great discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ralo. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.